So today's episode is going to be all about money. So oftentimes I've heard from clients or people that stereotype psychotherapists as to making a lot of money. And honestly, nothing could be further from the truth. Today's episode is going to break apart how we do business. Now, granted, this is probably a really hard episode for me to film just because I'm kind of bound by all the contracts from insurance companies I've signed associated with non-disclosures. But with that said, today's going to provide you a little bit of a general education behind what you can look up online associated with how we get paid and just the general outline on how everything works. Generally speaking, you're going to be surprised when it comes to what your insurance doesn't cover and also what we do behind the scenes that's associated with what is that seemingly large amount of money that, of course, you pay every single week for an hour of a psychotherapist's time. Or should I say 53 minutes? So with that said, we're going to break things apart, try to explain everything, and of course, try to shine some light in the dark corners of where your money actually goes and what your therapist does beyond what they're expected to do. All right, let's get started. So dun dun dun. Not what you're expecting, I'm guessing, right? When it comes to your psychotherapist, especially what you see at the end of the week when it comes to what we charge your insurance. So if a therapist makes $38 an hour, where does the rest of the money go to? So hopefully during this episode, I'm going to break some things apart and try to explain the whole business model of psychotherapy. With that said, just to kind of prove my point, let's check out one more website when it comes to what therapists get paid. And probably a lot of my subscribers will notice this website. I've used this once in the past when it comes to my job video and trying to find your dream job. With that said, great resource. Highly recommend it. It's really going to help you when it comes to building your individualistic resume. Let's put in professional counselor here. All right, going down to the actual pay, right? Because we've already been through this before, which is right down here, Connecticut. Go. Right, and hourly. So this one has a lower forecast when it comes to salaries, and whether it's $38 for the average salary or 25.82, it really, again, it depends on the company that you're working for, what they can negotiate from the insurance companies, right? And kind of nuts, huh? And it's not very fair when it comes to what these insurance companies sometimes get away with. And here's some more locality pricing. So one of the ways that insurance companies can negotiate for a higher rate when it comes to that provider has to do with overhead, right? So if they're a big organization, such as in this state, UCFS or maybe some other big wig mental health providers like Wheeler Clinic, I guarantee you that not only do they have dedicated billing departments that are constantly negotiating these rates, but on top of that, since they have greater oversight, training, and overhead, they get a lot more money when it comes to that per hour rate. So oftentimes people are under the misnomer that they'll get a deal if they go to a bigger practice. And that might be true when it comes to special grants and donations that these organizations receive. But usually, when it comes to the actual rate that they're charging your insurance, it's typically a higher negotiated rate than somebody like me that literally I am my billing person, I am my receptionist, I am all the above when it comes to marketing and advertising and my quality training director. It's all me. Versus, I remember I worked for a nonprofit once and my program director got paid like $140,000 a year. And my clinical director got just under that, $130,000 a year. And then you have billing managers and there's a lot of overhead. So typically what ends up happening when it comes to submitting your claims is that somebody has to make sure that they were submitted properly. Somebody has to make sure that, again, the insurance company accepted the claim and paid out. And that, again, what you paid for your copay matches up with what they paid and clearing out those numbers and everything else. And that takes time. And that typically is included on part of your base pay. So if you pay $100 or $130 per session when it comes to psychotherapy, that is dictated by the rate that your insurance company has agreed with that actual provider, and B has to do with the overall size of the organization. All right, so let's talk about the next expense, which is a T1016 code. All right, so just as a general example of T1016 codes, at least minus one private insurer that I can think of, only one other state funded Medicaid program actually pays for a T1016 code. And usually they're broken down into units, right? And it changes every few years. I want to say right now it's 12 units, and one unit typically is representative of 15 minutes of a provider's time. And the rates or the payout varies depending on the provider and everything else. But again, most insurance companies don't pay for, physician phone calls or me speaking to a family's lawyer or talking to DCF or a guardian ad litem, somebody's teacher or a previous provider even. So just take that into account the next time that you try to figure out what your money is going towards. All right, so first and foremost, we're at the DAS website associated with state jobs or state employment for the state of Connecticut. And if you scroll down, and they don't have a lot of professional counselor positions that are posted, but a close second that is really comparable to the work that we do would be a clinical social worker. So let's click on that real quick. And as you can see, they get paid quite a bit more. And on top of their pay, you're going to notice their benefits packages, right? And you usually, I've heard stories, and one of the stories I've heard is in a lot of ways between the platinum insurance company that they use, and I know who it is, but again, I'm omitting that just for my own purposes, and the 15 sick days that they get, and I'm assuming it's 15 vacation days. And the fact that they do cover most of the insurance expenses, including, if you choose a disability insurance provider, and of course a retirement plan, it all adds up. And, especially really good companies, these benefits packages can add up to about $60,000. Again, $60,000, which means that, let's say a really successful psychotherapy provider gets a gross income of $125,000 a year. Well, you kind of want to subtract the $60,000 that they're not making when it comes to them paying for their own health benefits and being able to take a day off. And if your psychotherapist takes a week off to go on a cruise, just like I do every year, well, guess what? Nobody's really paying for that. That's me not getting paid for that entire week that I have off. So I have to save my money in order to do that. Right? So unlike a state job where the office is provided, the utilities are provided, the internet's provided, I have to pay for all that. Right? When I expanded my basement and created 2 office spaces, they are now considered rec rooms by the town of Old Lyme, which means that I'm going to be taxed on it. And my overall value of this home is going to go up, and my insurance is going to go up, and everything else. So it adds up, even working from your home, which is more appealing to my type of provider these days, just because it's one of the ways that we can recoup some of that money back. Again, it's just one more thing that you need to take into account when it comes to trying to figure out your therapist's gross income. Another thing I want to point out as well is our typical work schedules, right? So, for instance, if you have a therapist like me that works 9 hours per day, well, I don't do that because I want to work 9 hours per day, but it's because I create 9 appointments, assuming at least one is going to cancel on me. And that might be when I can take my lunch. If that doesn't happen, great, I made some extra money that day, but at the same time, I'm missing out on my lunch. Sometimes more than one client will cancel throughout the course of a day, which is why more and more therapists are choosing to work from home, right? Due to the nature of our jobs, which is we work with both low-functioning and high-functioning clients. Clients that are mature and very professional, right? And also clients that are kind of lacking when it comes to those areas. And since we're a fee-for-service provider, we take that loss when that happens. And some other areas I want to kind of point out too when it comes to things that we don't get paid for have to do with updating our provider directory every 3 months. So I would be more than happy to show you guys some of the notices that I get from a lot of my credentialed providers. But again, since I do have contracts with these organizations, I can't show them to you. But every 3 months, I'm reminded by all my credentialed providers to update my provider directory. Now, granted, this comes from a very sad place where a lot of psychotherapists wrongfully don't get back to individuals that are trying to seek appointments or try to understand that provider's availability, especially if they don't have openings. It's very common that I hear from my newer clients that they might have called 3 or 4 different therapists before me and never got a call back. And because of that, unfortunately, the state and also these credentialed insurance companies took it upon themselves to create legislation to force psychotherapists to update their provider directories for every insurance company and every place that they market themselves every 3 months, even though my availability changes sometimes week to week. So 3 months from now, maybe I do have an opening or maybe I don't, but I know that next week I will. So how do you respond to a form like that, whether or not you're taking on new clients? So just something to keep in mind as well when it comes to logistics, just to continue operating under your insurance that you're currently having us accept. All right, so on top of all of that, right, there's expenses that we incur when it comes to doing things for you guys as well, like sending reminder texts. Typically, they can charge up to and around 20 cents per text when that happens. When it comes to the electronic records processing software that we use, right, for your progress notes, that's so much money every single month. And our professional liability insurance is so much money every month. And, whatever utilities that we use for electricity and internet. When it comes to general liability insurance for trip and falls, that costs us money every single month. So the website I maintain costs me money. To have a confidential encrypted email costs me money every single month. Domain names. And the list goes on and on. So if you think about it, the measly, for a lot of psychotherapists, $95 to, let's say, $150 that we get paid doesn't stack up to all the expenses and voluntary time that we exhibit in the course of our performing our duties to the best of our abilities. In addition, right, since we are always on call, think about holidays. And think about when it comes to us being on vacation and still being on call, responding to your text. So hopefully these things become appreciated, but most other agencies or other forms of doing business, you get charged more for that. There's a special rate for emergency calls or urgent calls or some employees showing up to work on one of their days off. And again, typically they get paid at least 4 hours worth of work when that happens as an incentive to do their jobs, right? We as psychotherapists, not so much. All right, so some more things that therapists don't get paid for is anything that's asynchronous when it comes to communication. Texting, emails, voicemails. Anytime a provider decides to be both responsible and a professional provider and they respond to those communications, we're not getting paid. We only get paid for synchronous communication. Oftentimes that means video audio interactions, either in person or through a virtual medium, or sometimes over the phone if conditions permit. With that said, we don't get night differentials, so when a client decides to text us at 6, 8, sometimes 10 p.m. or in the middle of the night, again, we don't get paid typically anymore for those types of communications. So just something to think about the next time that you engage your therapist when it comes to what is a part of what you think you're paying every single week. All right, so the very last thing I want to point out is continuing education, right? Our education doesn't stop when it comes to us getting our license, and most states require a certain amount of continuing education units or CEUs to be performed every single year so we can stay on top of the latest and greatest interventions and ethical practices. And with that said, nobody pays for that but us when it comes to taking a portion of what you pay every single week to pay for these courses, to take the time off to take these courses, to read the latest and greatest books that come out. Nobody pays us for any of that. If we want a special certification, we don't get any more money typically to have that in trauma or online therapy or whatever model that we're currently following. Also, most states don't see a difference between higher levels of education when it comes to licensures. For instance, in my state, the state of Connecticut, they don't see the difference between a master's and doctoral provider or professional. Meaning, guess what? all that money that I put out for tuition and the years that I had to take off when it comes to time to complete my coursework and my dissertation, I didn't get a return for that. So me, like most people that continue their education, wanted to be a good provider, wanted to learn more about their specific profession. But at the same time, again, that is all seemingly incorporated into the money that we're already making. So as you can probably have already guessed, this is a part-time gig, meaning that I'm slowly trying to build up my YouTube channel, which means I'll make certain small errors from time to time. And one of the biggest ones I made in this video had to do with the fact that I didn't mention taxes. Taxes are by far the largest part of our expenses. And of course, I have to pay more being an independent practitioner and also business owner, owning an LLC. So on top of taxes that constitute roughly, extremely roughly, 30% of my overall income, right? So the rule of the third, so to speak. But on top of that, I have what's called property taxes. And every town does their property taxes a little bit different. The town I'm currently leaving, which is Essex, charges pretty much for everything. Reams of paper, the chair that you're sitting in, desk. And of course, they use like a depreciation system over so many years. But every town's different. So taxes, taxes, taxes. That's a big part of what, again, is already taken out by both you and your employer with your current job. Versus us being by ourselves, they take out a lot more when it comes to that process. So it's a lot, right? A lot of information I just threw at you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we do and what I can talk about. But with that said, hopefully this kind of shows you guys that unlike an electrician or a plumber or another service provider that can come to your house that can just charge what they can get away with and what the market kind of prevails, we're more regulated by not only state and federal law, but at least when it comes to pricing, your individual insurance company that we're credentialed with. And of course, we have to follow the rules and policies that's associated with us getting paid in the first place, which typically means that, yes, it's part of our business when it comes to texting back and forth, but that's time that you don't pay for. And when it comes to all the additional billing practices that, of course, when it comes to submitting claims and everything else, that is a part of how we get paid. Disputing claims, working with insurance companies that have second or tertiary insurances isn't typically something that clients are aware of. When we make small phone calls to other providers, right? Typically, unless you're a kid and unless it's a very specific insurance policy, most of the time, types of case management, what's called a T1016 code, most certainly doesn't get covered by most entities, which means that oftentimes either we have a choice to charge for the 15 to a half an hour minute phone call or to, again, try to assimilate that as us doing our jobs appropriately. And again, taking that as a cut out of our 24-hour day and what we should be making when it comes to working minute by minute. So with that said, hopefully this has deepened your appreciation for psychotherapists a little bit more and has kind of exhibited the realities associated with the nominal amount of money we actually get paid to spend those few minutes with you every single week, right? We don't get vacation time. We don't get health benefits unless we pay for them. Your psychotherapist for granted. With that said, stay tuned to our next episode.